Well, hello. Thought I'd do some updating on where I'm at on this machine. I have pulled the table off of it. I went ahead and pulled the X and the Y axis off. I broke down the power feed, figured out what was wrong with the power feed, and I put those parts up. I'm not going to reinstall the power feed at this time. Doing some looking, the Z axis is pretty good. I am thinking about adding in some grease ports to where I can grease that bevel gear a little easier. This is part of the power feed assembly that I forgot to put in the box with the rest of it. The things that are promising is that there's still a lot of scraping on the bedways, which is good. That makes me happy because that tells me that most of the wear is isolated to certain little areas, so that this machine spent most of its time working in one little spot. But I mean, I have this is the X-axis screw. It's got a touch of wear in this nut assembly right here, but it's not so bad that it can't be used. It does have some wear, but this one would be a lot more difficult to replace than the other one I'm going to show you here in a second. Now, let me get that to where it'll sit and not fall. Stay. Now, I have, this is the Y-axis right here. And it's got, that's where the nut goes, those 4 holes right here. And it is a weird setup because the holes are offset to keep you from putting them in the wrong spot. But best I could tell after talking to some other old machinery builders is that at some point that machine had the 4 holes. 2 of them were dowel pins, threaded in dowel pins. The other 2 were for countersunk screws. Somebody at some point pulled those dowel pins out and actually stripped the threads. I might have to helicoil those threads. And they just put 2 screws in and they forced one of them in. And that's what really damaged that one hole because they cross-threaded it. And I know the old joke is that cross-threading is just free Loctite. But as a machinist, if you cross-thread something, I really, really want to take a hammer to your skull because that just screws everything up. You shouldn't have to cross-thread. Something that's machined, you should not have to do that for. There's other things I'm going to have to look at. This setup used thrust washers. That's what that is right there, is the little thrust washers. However, I've got to see if I can get these little thrust washers because that one is broken. So it still turns free, still feels good. When I put the assembly together, it feels fine. But I don't know. I will have to figure that out at some point. So, and there's other things that are different. Where is that? Where is that at? It's right here. This, whoops, that's a gib. This was on the right-hand side of the machine. You know, this is the bearing cap for the X-axis rod. On a Bridgeport, unless you have a power feed, they're a lot smaller. Because here's the one on the left side of the machine right here. As you can see, there's quite a bit of difference in size. Like I said, this is the left side of the machine. They also, they've got oil ports, ball detents for oil, and those were absolutely stopped up with grease. Some point, some knucklehead decided to stuff them full of grease instead of oil, which is just another sign of somebody not know what they're doing. I'm going to decide if I'm going to make a bushing, because this goes over that rod and it has a keyway in it. The key was sheared while pulling it apart, so that was half the problem, or part of it. Rest of it was a stripped out bull gear, or a bevel gear. But I may just leave that in there, you know, clean it up, put it back on, and just have this extra spot here that doesn't hurt anything. So I haven't decided yet. That's a problem for future me. You know, right now it's just a deal of figuring all this out. We did get Dad has been piddling with it, and he found out an innovative little way to help change the speed on this machine because you have a series of belts. You have a big fat wide belt that goes to the column of the machine. Then you have that has 3 locations. Then you have the drive motor that's in the base of the machine has 3 sheave locations, and whichever, if it's in 1, 2, or 3, and then it matters which, if you are in C, B, or A on the wide belt, that sets your speed. It'll go from like 150 RPMs up to 12 or 1400 RPMs. Actually, I can look and tell you. 135 to 1300. I don't know. And right now, this old darling is set at about 340 RPMs, which is about where I want it. Well, never mind. I disconnected the power to it. I forgot. Anytime you're working on a machine, you always disconnect the power, because the last thing you want to do is to be messing with something and somebody bump a power switch and you feed your arm to the machine. Next thing I've got to decide is, do I want to pull this off? I've thought about it, because all that holds the X-axis on, you are in my way, is a gib right here and this screw down here. I haven't decided yet. I could pretty much clean this without too much trouble, so I may leave it alone. Also, I have to get what's the drive shaft off the power feed off. It's got a damaged little ear on it. So let me bring you down here so I can show you the table. So this is the table off the milling machine. It weighs about 50 pounds, so I'm not going to pick it up. But it's a horse. But right now, because I've got it tore apart, I can really clean it. Like I said, it's heavy and it's weak. It doesn't have any good handholds to grab it. So I have to just kind of find a good spot to get a hold of it. I've also found a multitude of oddball homemade additions to this machine that I haven't figured out yet. This little deal was attached to the saddle, and I just don't know what the heck that is yet. I hadn't figured it out. I've been looking at it, thinking about where it was. There was a piece that was attached to this right here, but it already had a piece, a catch. This is some kind of a stop assembly, I'm guessing. I don't know. But I'm just going to clean it up and put it up, and when I figure out what the heck it is, I'll put it back on. So I'm going to show you that screw. Yeah, you're fixing to get a tour of the filthy shop real quick while I get over here. All right. So let's see here. Pull you in closer so you can see this. This is the X-axis screw. This is the nut I was talking about that had the offset holes in it. It's also designed for 2 dowel pins and 2 countersunk screws. Countersunk screws have been machined to allow for clearance for the screw heads. It is left-hand thread. What's really making me kind of crazy is that all the bolts in this machine are imperial, so they're in fractional sizes. The lead screws are metric, so this is a 16 millimeter by 3 millimeter pitch. So, but this screw should not be so tight you can't turn it, but you should not have that much wobble in it, and you damn sure should not have that much wobble. So that's why, as I was machining, as I would run the machine, the table kept wanting to do this number. No matter what I did, no matter how positive I kept it, a little bit of, just a little bit, you can get away with that. But when one's wore this bad, there's nothing you can do. Like I said, it is left-hand thread. Lordy mighty, it's going to take me a second to unscrew this thing. And this is a fun little shaft, because I really do not want to rebuild this shaft from scratch. So after talking to my dad and my uncle, we've discussed some different ways I can salvage it, see if my ideas are sound. I've talked to some other machinists I know, just getting everybody's thoughts and opinions on it. This shaft, it looks like that this thrust washer face right here is a separate piece, but I have put the nut back on there set it up to where it was caught and whapped it pretty good. Not with a sledgehammer, mind you, just gave it a pretty good little bit of pop, and it didn't budge. And it wouldn't, because this diameter is smaller than this diameter, it has to go this way. So you would think being captured in a good hard pop would drive it out, but no, it didn't budge. So I'm just gonna leave it alone. What I'm looking at doing is cutting the shaft off right here where my finger is, boring it out a little bit, drilling it and reaming it to a set size, getting a replacement 16 millimeter by 3 millimeter pitch piece of or trapezoidal all thread, and then machining a nub down to where it'll fit inside there, and either pin it, I'll thread it together, or I'll heat fit it with Loctite. I haven't decided yet. Now the other factor that I have to look at, because there is a lot of features on this end of the shaft I don't want to have to replicate, because if this is built in, that means I'd have to start with a shaft that's bigger than this, turn it all down. I'd have to turn these features. I'd have to machine this screw right here, and this is probably hardened. I hadn't hit it with a file yet. I hadn't gotten that far. Now, cutting these threads and these key seats are not a problem, but cutting the fits is not a problem. But there's just a lot. This thing is what we call a busy little shaft. Just a lot going on. Not to mention cutting the left-hand trapezoidal thread, which is not a problem. I cannot do it here. I will have to take it to I'll probably have to get permission from my job to do it up there. Because cutting left-handed threads, right-handed threads, you feed the tool in and you cut this way. Left-handed threads, you feed in here and you cut out. So, but I don't have any way of cutting Acme threads. I don't have anything that's even close to that pitch. So, I mean, I can get close to it, but nothing real accurate. The other option is that I could go ahead and go with a 1/2 inch 10 thread. Right now, because this is a 16 by 3 millimeter pitch, each revolution, full revolution, is 3 millimeters of movement. If I go with a 1/2 inch 10 thread, which the 3 millimeter is about 118 thousandths, approximately. If I go with a 1/2 inch 10 thread, 1 inch divided by 0.10 is, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. 1/2 inch, 1 inch divided by 10 is 0.10. So that would be, every rotation would be 100 thousandths. But it would just make my dials useless because they would no longer be accurate. So as I turned it, I couldn't use the vernier scale, figure out where I am, unless I built another scale. And I don't have a dividing head. That would be something that I just can't really do right this moment. As far as the nut goes, there is no backlash adjustment on these. I've thought of several different ways. I've thought about boring this out. Just go ahead, because I've got enough meat there to where I can put a threaded brass insert in. I can set up in the mill, drill it, and use a small boring bar to bore it to a set size. Now, I can't do that on my mill, but I could. That'd be something I'd have to do either at work or go to my old job and borrow their setup. And but what I thought about doing instead was boring half of it to take that press in piece that I would Loctite and set screw lock in. The other side of it, I would thread the OD of that bushing, and I would thread the ID of this to where I could screw that in. It would be a split nut, so that to where if it started to get wear, I could pull the screw out till it clears the nut that turns, undo the set screw, and advance it just slightly, and then relock it in place. And now that changes the position. That takes all the backlash out. Now it's back 100% positive. This machine, however, is probably around World War II vintage. So it's 70-something years old. And this is the original factory nut. I didn't think it was until I started realizing that the numbers that are stamped on, this got number 5 stamped in it, corresponds to a lot of other numbers I found on the machine. So this is a factory part. So let me screw that back in because I don't want to lose any of it. So yeah, had to remind myself that this is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey instead of lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. So I'm going to show y'all one other thing before I stop this little update video I'm doing. So let me get my fancy camera stand right here. Okay. The little quick change tool post has been working beautiful. I am able to get some really, really good finishes on this material here, this aluminum. That's just a play around piece. I hadn't messed with steel. Now, it's still a 8 or quarter horsepower motor. You're not going to be hogging any metal. The feed does not work correctly, so I'm having to hand feed, which is not a big deal because as you're cutting, you just go, you just keep a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. As long as you're counting, you're keeping a steady pace of movement, and that gives you a very nice, even finish. So, and I can change the speed, I can make it run faster, but it's bad about stalling at faster speeds. So I'm pretty much stuck right there. So, yeah. But the new live center worked good. It let me really get it. I had a part the other day strung out and I was messing with it and it worked out great. So, but yeah, there's lots of other little projects I need to do on this whole thing. I need to tighten all this up because there's a lot of movement in this. There's not any movement on the rack side, but there is movement in this side. So probably need to actually put a new nut in this crossfeed here to give it some, because that right there is not real good. I mean, I can pull against it, and as long as I'm feeding out, for example, it stays positive. But if you're going to go feed in, you feed out, push it in, and then, that keeps it positive, but it will still, it's going to push back, but it's going to push back against the positivity, and you can set your depth. As long as you don't move nothing after that, you can maintain a reasonable level of accuracy. I do mean reasonable. Let's get realistic. This machine is not going to turn those 1/10 fits I turn at the plant. No, this machine is not capable of that. Yeah, I mean, I get it within a thousandth and sand and file the bejesus out of it. So, but the next big step on the big machine over here is I have found a lot of burrs and rough spots. I'm going to set this old darling up. Let me pick this back up a little bit. Oop. I'm going to take that table, put it on the workbench. I'm going to get some honing stones and I'm going to hone all those surfaces that are rough. I don't want any rough surfaces. I want everything to be slick as glass. I still have to make a new Gibbs screw for the X-axis because it was broken and somebody just rigged one together. So, but I think the rest of the morning I'm going to play with tearing apart another machine we've got out there, an old brake lathe that is not fit for anything, and Dad and I are going to take it apart to salvage the big metal out of it. So, I mean, I can run y'all out there and show y'all that just for giggles, but then I'm going to go work on other stuff. I'm going to get to work on this. This is an old Amco brake lathe out here. We want to salvage this right here. We want to salvage some of the salvageable parts that we can use for other projects. So I'm going to start doing some breakdown on it. I've gotten this loosened up. I got this loosened up. I got these dials to where they are loose again, but I have to figure out how to get them off. Just a lot of set screws take off, some nuts take off, just lots of, this thing sat out in the weather for a long time. So I'm just going to get to fighting it. Y'all have a good day. Thanks for watching.